Today we're going to read the last chapter of The Dragon's Child, called The Biggest Drum in the World. The dragon's cave was beginning to give off a rather bad smell. "You spend too much time in here," Manon told Dando. "Come into the sun." But Dando had nightmares about the weeks he'd spent in a cage and was frightened of being caught again. He only felt safe outside when the light was fading. "I'd rather not come out yet," he said. "It's getting smelly in here," Manon scolded. "You need fresh air, and so do I." She pinched her nose. "And apart from anything else, you need more room to practice flying." "I suppose I do." Dando went to the mouth of the cave and cautiously poked out his head. Manon gave him a little push, and he shuffled into the sunshine. It was such a beautiful day. For a while, Dando forgot to be frightened, and soon they were leaping over the fine bubbles that foamed at the edge of the sea. Every now and then, Dando would spread his wings and sweep them through the spray, covering Manon with glittering cascade of water. And although she was laughing, Manon was stunned by the great curve of the dragon's wings and the length of fine bones and the shimmering golden scales. So why couldn't Dando fly? Was he lazy or afraid of falling? From his hiding place on the cliff, Lord Drum watched Manon and the dragon, longing to be with them and desperately wishing that he were not a welcome child. When the sun was at its fiercest and they stood in their own shadows, Manon said goodbye to Dando and ran back to the camp before she could be missed. As she approached the tall fence, she wondered at the eerie silence. Perhaps the sun has sent everyone to sleep, she thought. But there was no one in the camp. She looked in every shelter, even in the grand tent. The place was deserted. Where had the welcome people gone? Manon didn't like them, but they were the only family she had, and she was curious to know what had become of them. Could they be in the forest collecting wood for a new building? Manon went to investigate. "Doggins sleep all day," she told herself, "so I'll be quite safe." It was pleasantly cool under the tall trees, but so quiet, even the birds had stopped singing. Manon walked deeper and deeper into the forest. As she marched on, she never dreamed that welcome people were far, far away. They had run to hide in the distant hills when the camp was invaded by Doggins. And where were the Doggins now? The trees that crowded around Manon were so tall and dense they turned day into night. Only a stray sunbeam managed to pierce the thick canopy of leaves. And all at once, Manon realized that she had lost the path. She turned around again and again, searching for a landmark, for anything that might show her the way out. She saw a light, two lights, red pinpoints of flame that multiplied as they drew closer. 10, 12, 20, and now Manon could see that the lights were glowing, fiery eyes, and she screamed in a voice she hadn't used since the day the Welkins had captured her. High above, the bird's sharp eyes had marked Manon's passage through the trees, and hearing the desperate cry, she guessed what had happened. "Doggins!" she twittered, and she swung down to the beach and the dragon's cave as fast as she could. "Dragon's child!" screamed the bird, waking Dando from a pleasant sleep on his latest favorite rock. "Come quickly! Manon needs us! She's in the forest and the Doggins are everywhere!" "Oh, oh, oh!" Dando tumbled off of the rock. "Doggins? What shall we do? What can we do?" "How should I know?" cried the bird. "You think of something for a change." Dando couldn't think. There wasn't time to think. His head was buzzing. He tore up the cliff path while the bird flew before him, across the field of bushes, around the empty camp, and into the forest. And when he saw the Doggins' fiery lamp-like eyes, he forgot to be frightened and became very, very angry. "Don't you dare hurt my friend!" he breathed. "Don't you dare!" And his breath was filled with burning sparks that made the nasty creature shrink back, howling in dismay. This way, sang the bird, looping over the long, hairy arms that reached out to catch her. At last, the two friends burst into the little clearing where Manon stood, too terrified to scream anymore. Dando rushed to her side. "Climb on my back," he commanded, "and we'll fly away." Manon scrambled onto the rough back and clasped onto Dando's horny spines. "Dando," she whispered, "can you really fly?" "I'll have to," he grunted. "It's now or never." And with a beating heart, he remembered his mother's instructions. "Think flying. Let your thoughts run into your wings. And so he did. He thought and he thought. He tried and he tried. His beautiful golden wings brushed the forest floor and fanned the dark forest air, scattering dust into the narrow rays of sunlight, but they wouldn't lift him off the ground. 2 glistening tears spilled from his beautiful golden eyes, and he said in a hushed voice, "My wings are useless. I shall never fly." Maenen laid her head against the scaly back. "You will," she whispered, "for you are marvelous and magical. You just need a little time." Time. Yes, that was it. He needed time to get his wings into the right rhythm. But there was no time left. The Doggins, sensing victory, had begun to creep closer. Soon they lost all fear of the helpless dragon and were running around him, shrieking with laughter and leaping through the angry bursts of flame as if they were nothing more than moonbeams. Maenen began to lose hope. She closed her eyes and waited for a sharp claw to drag her from the dragon's back. But all at once, the terrible shrieking stopped, and into the sudden silence there came a distant boom, 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 closer and closer. Boom, boom, boom. Maenen opened her eyes. There, only a few feet away, stood Lord Drum. He had made himself a new drum. It looked like the biggest drum in the world, and it made a deep, threatening sound. Boom, boom, boom. The Doggins shrank back, stupefied by the drumming. To their ears it was a strange and dreadful noise. It bit into their skulls and crushed their thoughts. Boom, boom, boom. They covered their ears and tried to shake the drumming out of their heads. "Fly, fabulous beast, while you still have time," called Lord Drum. Dando dipped his wings. His toes bit into the ground and pushed. The golden wings swept upward, lifting Dando into the air. "Up here," called the bird, and Dando tilted toward a tiny patch of blue where the giant trees parted to reveal the sky. But Maenen, looking back, saw brave Lord Drum still beating a rhythm on his giant drum. He looked up with a pale, determined face and smiled at her, and Maenen found that she couldn't leave him. "We must take Lord Drum," she said. "The Doggins will eat him, and he saved our lives." "In that case," agreed Dando as he swooped toward the boy while Maenen shouted, "Jump, Lord Drum! Catch a hold of the dragon's tail!" "A dragon?" said Lord Drum. "So that's what he is!" Casting his drumsticks aside, he leaped for the dragon's tail. Up they soared, up, up, and up, while the Doggins howled in a fury, up above the trees and into the warm, bright sky. "Where are we going?" called Maenen. "Where all dragons go," sang Dando. "We're going to the homeland." "Since you're going my way," the bird settled on the dragon's head, I might as well grab a lift." The welcome people looked up in astonishment as Dando sailed over their heads, a bird on his head, a girl on his back, and a boy sitting on his tail. "It's the fabulous beast," cried Lady Bolda, "and he's stealing our son." "Perhaps the beast is saving our son," murmured her husband, and he watched the great winged creature flying north until he was no bigger than a speck of glittering wind-blown dust. And Great Smold felt a terrible emptiness when he saw his only son, the last welcome child, disappear. Perhaps he wouldn't have felt so bad if he'd known how happy Lord Drum would be in the dragon's homeland. In time, the world forgot about Doggins and the welcome people. It was just as if they had never existed. But of course, no one ever forgot about dragons. The end.